Hello there, chapter 14 then. We're back again, aren't we, for another exciting episode of the podcast, The Worse You Feel. Not you, of course, that's just the name of the chapter. Let's get on with this then, shall we? Let's see what we do. Oh, what's that doing? Is that a buzzing noise?
This audiobook has been broken into multiple parts to make the download faster. You have reached the end of a part, but not the end of the complete audiobook.
Oh dear.
So please check your library for the next part of this audiobook.
Okay, I'll do that. Sorry, a more slick operation would have edited it. Oh, what's going on now? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Stasiland.
Oh, okay.
Stories from Behind the Berlin Wall by Anna Funder. Read by Danica Fairman. Chapter 14. The Worse You Feel. I call Julia and ask her over for lunch. I make salmon pasta with mascarpone, egg yolks and cream. I'm putting as many calories into something as I know how. She rings about the time she's due and asks whether it's okay to be late. Sure, I say. About how late? Half an hour? See you then. I stand at the kitchen window. A man wearing gloves comes into the yard from one of the side wings, carrying a metal bucket of orange coal dust. He opens the hopper and pours it in. Particles of the consistency of talc or something cremated.
Okay, so it's good to be back with Funder's narrative, isn't it? Again, here it's always a relief, I think. Not the dialogue. I mean, we need the dialogue with these various people to move the narrative forward, but it's quite nice to sort of ease ourselves back into the more figurative narrative, I think, of Anna Funder. But that's just my penchant for fiction, I think. But look, we've got this bathos, haven't we, here, of bringing it back down. I mean, this is simply coal. What is it? Coal dust to presumably fire their heating. But she compares it to something cremated, which has a sense of sort of human remains there. So again, it's undermining even the very practical, very helpful coal dust that's been brought to them, but she sort of undermines it and brings it back down to death and baseness, I would say. Good old Funder. Always a cheery soul, isn't she?
The hopper clangs shut in a burst of orange cloud. This dust is everywhere. When you can't smell it, it's still there, in the orange winter air.
What's that, Anna? You can't smell it? A big emphasis on the sense of smell. She just can't resist it, can she? She cannot help it.
When Julia arrives, she's oddly polite, like a person in someone else's house. I guess she's used to slipping in when I'm not here. We sit down in the kitchen and I open a beer. Mind if I smoke? She asks. Not at all. I didn't know you smoked. I just started again, she says. She lights a cigarette and smokes half of it before she stubs it out. We eat, and afterward she lights another, holding it in a practiced way in the cleft of her index and middle fingers, moving it around as she talks. She is in the same chair as before, the one with the blind tethered to it. Her back is to the window, and her face is in shadow, her eyes shiny and dark. Behind her, the sky is the colour of wet wool.
Oh, brilliant. What about that? Is there a better simile anywhere in literature? Probably, but I like that anyway. Behind her, the sky is the colour of wet wool. What about that? What an interesting description. We don't need that information at all, do we? It doesn't really help us necessarily. And yet she gives us it all the same. And I guess it's just to really... I don't know why she does it. It lends the whole thing a very narrative feel, the feel of a fictional novel. Why she does it, I don't know. I think to immerse the reader, to make us part of the fabric, to put us in that scene, it certainly works. But what an interesting description, the colour of wet wool. What does that look like? Depends on what colour the wool is, I suppose, doesn't it? Could be that rainbow wool that you get sometimes. I don't know. Anyway, I love it. Good description.
I've invited her here for a meal, but we both know there is more of her story to tell. I begin by asking whether she saw her life unfolding differently after the wall came down. I wonder what it would have been like to watch the barrier that had held you in disappear, and the whole world open up like some strange and new, dreamt-of thing. Well, it's complicated, she says, running a hand through her hair. Static from her sleeve raises single strands into the air. I think I am perhaps... She pauses. I notice that I still... She breathes in. There are some things, for instance... She stops. The whole thing really threw me, she says, exhaling. Not only that, but also afterwards. Lots of things, personal things. I think that the whole Wende in 1989 and everything I went through around it, I think that I experienced it more intensely than others. She's found the old place where the lino is leaving the tabletop and starts to worry it with a fingernail. I've been talking about it with my therapist, and she keeps coming back to a theme, one that is quite uncomfortable for me. It has to do with how I can't subject myself to any sort of authority. It's now to the point where I can't commit myself to coming anywhere on time. She smiles. As you saw, I just can't have structure imposed on me. I pour more beer. It's the second, or maybe the third, and it is loosening up the afternoon. For a moment, I am an eye in the ceiling corner. I see two women, like reflections of one another, at an old table in an old kitchen in East Berlin. One has her sleeves rolled up, the other draws her black jumper over her fists, bringing them out only to smoke.
The description there of both of them together as being almost identical and like reflections is something which she comes back to again and again, and we see it again in this chapter, as well as beyond. And I think we've heard it before, haven't we, as well? The fact that she sees her as her opposite almost. And so there is sort of, again, as you'd find in a novel, the sort of she's a foil character really, that is Julia, and she represents how different her life, Anna Funder's life, could have been. Yeah, had she been in Germany or East Germany at this time. So the reference to her having the black jumper, we've seen that before. It's that sort of anonymity that she seems to go for. It's practical, it's utilitarian, but it's also there's a sense of trying to hide something. I think particularly when it's pulled over her fists, so even her hands are hidden, there's a sense of trying to hide herself, which as we get through this chapter, of course, we learn why that is, and what happened at the fall of the wall around that time that affected her so badly with the rape. So we'll get to that shortly, but we'll just keep pushing on for now. But just the description of them, even due to the colours of the yard, grey and brown, the tiny blue pilot light above the sink, and the remains of a pink sauce in a pan. Quite sensory imagery, again, not typical of a non-fiction piece. So she's bringing those fictional qualities into this piece, which does give that narrative drive. It really does allow the reader to imagine being there, and we're sort of following her through in this scene. Sorry for all the beeps again. If you can hear those, it really is manic trying to do these podcasts and trying to be on Teams at the same time. So I do apologise for the unprofessionalism of the whole thing. Not that it's any more unprofessional than a normal lesson, but you know what I mean. It does seem a bit chaotic. Anyway, let's push on, shall we?
This room seems a small shelter from the outside world, because the colours of the yard have seeped in here, grey and brown, apart from the tiny blue pilot light above the sink and the remains of a pink sauce in a pan. It's hard to live in society if you can't subordinate yourself to authority, Julia says, particularly German society. I think the reason why I can't has to do with a lot of things. Being trapped by the wall before, and then working in jobs which were way under my capacities and where I had no choice, in the hotel, and then afterwards. I just can't stand the sort of structures that keep you in, I guess. Her voice has gone very soft. And as well as that, she says, I was raped. That happened to me just after the wall fell. It was in the east, and it was really the last straw. Now I am cold and sober and scared of what I'm about to hear.
That triadic structure there, and understandably so, the cold and sober and scared, and even the effect of the beer, they might have loosened Julia's tongue enough to be able to talk about these very personal, very distressing experiences. But they're both sort of sobered by the reality here, aren't they? And the triadic structure, cold and sober and scared of what she's about to hear, the detail, the grim, horrific details of Julia's trauma.
I didn't know then what it cost Julia to tell me what had happened to her, and maybe she didn't either. A week later she rang and said that afterwards she had felt sick for 3 days. Shortly after the wall came down, prisoners held in the GDR, mostly political prisoners, were amnestied. Julia went back to Thüringen for a wedding. She was spending the night in the bride's apartment, a one-roomer at the top of a high-rise, and her friend was going to stay the night at the groom's. Julia accompanied her downstairs to a taxi. You never know what can happen on those housing estates, she says. Often there's no one around, and it can be a bit creepy. When she got back inside the building, there was a man waiting for the lift. It came, and they both entered and turned to face the closing doors. Julia says, I knew then. There was a moment when I thought something was wrong and I should run back out through those doors. But you were taught to say to yourself, don't be ridiculous. So I stayed put. The man looked at the floor number she had pressed. He didn't press one himself. The lift moved, then he jammed it with the emergency button. Sometime later, the janitor noticed that one of the lifts was stuck. He went to the roof and called down the shaft to see if anyone was inside or needed help. No answer came.
Just notice here that the narrative is being told here not through speech, direct speech anyway. It's been told through narrative and reported speech. So that's an interesting choice. And it may be because the actual direct speech from Julia is so broken and fragmented. It could be that could be the reason, or it could be that it's so powerful, this part of the narrative. It's so important and traumatic that it sort of needs to be couched in narrative terms. It needs more than just direct speech. It needs to be elaborated upon. But just worth being aware of that she does in this case slip from direct speech from Julia's perspective to actually narrating it directly herself.
The man was huge. He bashed Julia and held his hands over her face. She thought he was wearing a black wig. He threatened to kill her if she screamed, to kill her if she called the police. When it was over, she crawled from the lift to the apartment door. He ran down the stairs into the darkness. Julia spent the night alone, terrified, in the apartment. There was no telephone. The man was at large, and he knew where to find her. The next day, she managed to get herself to the police station. She received no counselling, no medical care, and no sympathetic treatment there. Rape was taboo in the GDR, she says. The female police officer on duty declined to examine her and went outside for a cigarette instead, so a male colleague conducted a complete physical, Julia naked on a table. Then they took her straight back to where it happened and made her go through everything step by step, pressing the emergency button herself and reenacting the attack. It was as if they didn't believe me, she says. He was at large, and they were offering her no protection. Then she went to the wedding. I couldn't tell anyone. It would have ruined their day, she says. I wore a lot of makeup, and somehow I got through it. We sit in the kitchen all afternoon. At one point it begins to hail, pieces of shattered sky falling against the window. Julia half smokes cigarettes and tells her story. There are no tears. It is as if she has no self-pity at all. She tells me her parents didn't know how to help her. The authorities quickly caught the man, a serial rapist with a string of previous convictions. Julia became unable to continue her studies, afraid of the slightest things. She felt separated from everybody again. At one point, before the trial, she took up an offer to be a teaching assistant for a semester in San Francisco, where she found people who talked about rape in ways that helped her. When she returned, she had to face him again. I almost think the trial was the worst thing of all. If it happened to me again, I would never bring charges, she says solemnly. I would kill the man. Julia had trouble finding legal representation and trouble affording it. While she was in America, the man was convicted of another rape, committed during the same spree. An even worse one. That girl was hospitalized. At Julia's trial, his lawyer argued diminished responsibility on the grounds of drunkenness and attacked her credibility as a witness. If this man's hands were over your face, he said, how could you not see what colour hair was on them? She said she didn't know. The man's wife testified that he had been at home all evening, but his mother lived with them too. She said her son had dyed his hair black that day and gone out. He hadn't come home till late at night, when he had burnt his clothes in the incinerator out the back. She looked across at Julia in the court and said, I'm sorry. The rapist was convicted, but Julia felt violated all over again. After the trial, she lived on her own in Lichtenberg in East Berlin. It was difficult for her to leave the apartment. If I had to buy something at the shops, she says, I would get up in the morning and put on all the loosest clothes I had, layers and layers of them to cover my body. Then I'd drink beer in the morning until I was numb enough to be able to get out the door. Her mother Irene did not understand why she didn't just get on with things. Julia was distressed, dropped out and suicidal, but once a week she dressed and drank and went to the station to call Irene from a phone booth and tell her everything was fine.
So this is Anna Funder's sort of slant on things in her narrative here. So there's the triadic structure of distressed, dropped out, and suicidal. Incremental as well, I would say, or incrementum. Either you can use either. It is incremental, but it serves the purpose of being the technique of incrementum. Distressed, dropped out, and suicidal. But for a week, once a week she dressed and drank, and I think that heavy alliterative D sound there as well, especially being pushed from the distressed and dropped in the previous sentence, distressed, dropped, dressed and drank, just adds the heaviness and the weight and the significance of that trauma. But yeah, juxtaposing those two words, dressed and drank, linked by the alliteration there, is particularly poignant, I think. And it's Anna Funder's spin on this, but it really highlights the poignancy and the pathos of this situation for Julia.
A cigarette sits forgotten in the ashtray. Its pale string of smoke responds to unseen currents in the room. I wanted to die, Julia says. I could not see how I could go on and live a life in this world, let alone a normal life. She considered throwing herself under a train at Lichtenberg station, but the idea of her sisters reading about it in the paper horrified her. Instead, she stopped eating. It seemed like the course of least resistance, she says. I was so disturbed, so right at the end of what I could manage. Her sister came over and watched what she ate. I owe her my life, really, Julia says. I would tell her I'd had enough, but she counted the mouthfuls and wouldn't let me stop. Julia has been able to study, in fits and bursts, over the last 6 years. She's had odd jobs to make ends meet, whatever I could find and whatever came along. Some translation, work in a second-hand clothes shop, private tutoring, the work at the rental agency. She is convinced that, in the amnesties of 1990, mistakes were made and the serial rapist was released. It was terrible that this happened to me right at that time, she says. It meant that before the good things about the West got to us, this negative thing, the letting loose of the criminals, affected me. She saw a documentary which claimed hardened criminals had been let loose in the scramble to free the political prisoners. Whether the man who raped her was among them, or whether he was just due for release, as he will be again soon, doesn't change Julia's experience. The end of the security state meant the end, too, of her personal security.
This is the technique here of the end of the security state meant the end, too, of her personal security. There's a few things happening here, and it's... I mean, you can refer to it in many different ways. You've got in a sense, it's a microcosm that her personal security is a little bit like the end of the security state and the surveillance state more largely. So there's that microcosm there. You could simply say it's symbolic. There's on a linguistic level, there's just the anaphora or repetition, I suppose, repetition really, of the word security there. But it sort of functions as zeugma. Zeugma rather than zeugma. I checked the pronunciation of that recently because someone challenged me on it. I thought, I better check that. So it turns out it's zeugma. It's a shame though, because I quite like zeugma. Anyway, it sort of is zeugma, and you'd certainly be able to get away with that if you were writing about it and say always say it functions as zeugma, because it's the same word. There's the security being used for two different things, one for the country, one for her personal life. But it's more accurate. There's something known as selepsis, which is SYLLEPSIS, selepsis, SYLLEPSIS, and it's very similar to zeugma, but it's used to sort of in a more downward negative way. So an example, when I was trying to find a way of defining this for you, an example I found was something like a piano is used. What was the example? A piano is used for public performance. One depresses the keys and the spirits of the audience. And so that's an example of, we'd normally call it zeugma because it's the word depressing being used in two different ways. But because it has sort of a negative tone to it, it's known as selepsis. Both words are interchangeable, and you'd be absolutely right to use either of them. But I think in this case, if you're going to use it, I'd say it functions as selepsis rather than zeugma. But it's up to you on that one. So it's quite a complex one, and actually, let's be honest, it's just Anna Funder simply saying what's happened, and drawing that parallel between her personal life and the end of an era for the German Democratic Republic. But it's worth looking at a linguistic point to make. It's quite a complex and sophisticated point you can make with that. So I'll leave that with you, but it's there for the taking if you want it.
The system which had imprisoned her had also somehow protected her. They were much quicker in the East to find and convict people, she says. Deep down, and for so far indelible reasons, she associates the fall of the wall with the end of what had remained of her private sphere after the Stasi had finished with it. Julia says she must go. She's meeting her sister. Yes, of course, I say, but I can't think of anything else. She sees I'm stuck. I think it's important what you're doing, she says, as if to comfort me, and I'm ashamed. For anyone to understand a regime like the GDR, the stories of ordinary people must be told, not just the activists or the famous writers. Her eyes, grey-green, have a dark shape in them. When it moves, I see that it is me. You have to look at how normal people manage with such things in their pasts.
That symbolism again of seeing herself in Julia. I mean, here physically in her eyes, but also seeing herself in Julia. They're the same age. They would have had similar lives had they been in different contexts. And I think it's important that Anna Funder sees her as another version of herself, and she's very interested in Julia's story for that reason.
I think I'm losing track of normal. Yes, she says, smiling. I know it's relative. We Easterners have an advantage, perhaps, in that we can remember and compare two kinds of systems. Her mouth twists into a smile as she collects her cigarettes and lighter and puts them in her pocket. But I don't know if that's an advantage. I mean, you see the mistakes of one system, the surveillance, and the mistakes of the other, the inequality. But there's nothing you could have done in the one and nothing you can do now about the other. She laughs wryly. And the clearer you see that, the worse you feel. She leaves, and I move to the front windows to watch over her when she reaches the front of the building. I see the crown of her head, messy blonde and vulnerable as a child's, as she bends to tuck one leg of her jeans into her sock. Then she puts the other foot on the pedal and pushes off. Tiresias on a bike.
So back to appearance again here, the messy blonde hair and vulnerable as a child is interesting, isn't it, as well as that simile, the vulnerability of Julia. She's just opened up to Anna, hasn't she, and she's explained some really traumatic part of her life, and she sees the vulnerability now of Julia. And then the reference at the end is a bizarre one, really. It's that Tiresias, who is in Greek mythology a prophet. So I suppose that's the link, I guess, sort of someone who would well, I mean, Tiresias was known for her well, it was a man or a god, a titan, I think it might be a titan, who was transformed into a woman for 7 years, but also was a prophet and could see the future, was a seer, a clairvoyant. So it's an odd reference to make here, really, I guess, other than just someone who tells the truth, someone who tells things, and Julia has told her truth here. So that's possibly the link there. But it's just, again, it's an absurd image, really, Tiresias on a bike.
I call Klaus. Want to get drunk? Sure. You okay? Yep. He doesn't believe me, but he is a cooperative soul, and we meet down the pub. I wake up and my head hurts if I move it. I need water. I look at the withered palms in the living room. I've crashed on the couch.
So those withered palms, again, are symbolic, aren't they? And we've seen them before, and we mentioned it before as possibly being symbolic of her own life at this point. And we can imagine, can't we? It must be awful. I mean, being there by yourself, essentially, in a foreign country, exploring such grim pasts as this. It must be really quite frightening and disorientating, I would imagine. And in fact, then she tells us in the next line, they reflect my inner state of being. So just in case we missed the symbolism ourselves, she actually tells us. And then we've got the triadic structure of her head, her mouth, and her poor, wretched lungs. And those pre-modifiers there just intensify to give that incrementum.
They reflect my inner state of being. More awful, though, than my head, my mouth, and my poor, wretched lungs is a vague feeling of regret. What did I say? I try to think back and try to remember who else was in the pub besides Klaus, and how drunk they were. I can't. In some kind of cosmic penance, I spend the day in bed. Late in the afternoon, I decide to go for a swim. At my local pool, you pay an entry price determined by how long you would like to spend there, starting at an hour and a half. This made no sense to me. Who can swim laps for that long? Until I realised that people use the pool as a bath. I want to do laps, There are bodies everywhere, swimming or paddling or what looks like actually washing themselves in the pool.
So again, another triadic structure there, this time incrementum again, but incrementum in terms of its absurdity, ending up with people washing themselves in the actual swimming pool. Sounds horrific, doesn't it?
There are no lanes. There is no agreed direction. People are breaststroking diagonally across, heads out like ducks. One man still has his glasses on. Kids jump in off the sides, and an old fellow resting in a corner is fiddling with the hair on a mole under his arm.
Oh, my word. So just as we saw the triadic structure building to that incrementum of sort of washing in the pool and that quite grotesque human behaviour, really, she looks out for that. She seems to revel, even though she's disgusted by it as we are. She revels in that very human baseness. And here we have, these people behaving strangely. This man in the corner fiddling with the hair on a mole under his arm. Oh my word, making me feel sick. So she likes to look out for the grotesque and the disturbing facets of human life.
I need to swing my limbs around and get some air in my lungs. It must be possible to do a lap or two. Perhaps there is a system of passing one another that I don't yet know, like boat rules. I choose a part of the pool that seems less crowded and begin with some freestyle. But it's not quite the stroke I'm used to, because I have to keep a lookout ahead for obstacles. Not only ahead, a teenager swimming crosswise through the pool is headed my way. As I turn to the other side to breathe, a kid with floaties on her arms jumps in and narrowly misses me. I look up. A woman in a yellow bikini has set off in my direction, dog paddling to keep her makeup dry. There is no way out.
Notice the reference to makeup again there. If we were to do one of those, what do they call those pictures that you can, I think they're called wordles, where you type all the words in of a text and it produces like a piece of art or a sort of poster that has the words, it makes the words bigger, the ones that are used more often. I think certainly makeup is used a lot in this book, that referred to it an awful lot. She seems very interested in women's makeup. And here we have this woman in a yellow bikini. Again, it's quite absurd, isn't it? So a yellow bikini, dog paddling to keep her makeup dry. Again, it's quite base, isn't it? She's sort of, I know that's what you call it, doggy paddle, but it's quite base, isn't it? Describing someone swimming as being dog paddling. It's not very flattering. And then to keep her makeup dry. There's a sense of vanity there, is there not? I don't know. Maybe that's, again, I'm never quite sure when I'm dealing with makeup, and I don't know whether what I'm saying is accurate, but if you're going swimming, presumably you're going swimming, aren't you? I don't know, like you wouldn't necessarily go swimming half-heartedly to keep your makeup dry. You'd reapply the makeup afterwards, I'd imagine, but what do I know? But yeah, just an interesting description and focusing on makeup again. And we get, the people's description, warts and all, don't we? Well, that's back to that man with his mole again, but we literally get warts and all in this book. We get the really very human foibles and sides of humanity. A bit like this podcast, really. It's warts and all, isn't it? You get the full gamut of human behaviours here.
I stop and tread water and consider my next move. Whilst I'm plotting a course, I am visited by a blinding question. What am I doing in this chaos anyway? In this chaotic city?
So, and this is the question, isn't it? This is purely, she refers to what she's doing in this chaotic swimming pool, but it means more largely she's referring to, why is she here in the first place? What is she doing here with her life? So the swimming pool actually is a microcosm for Berlin itself, for the madness and chaos in Berlin, and of course the madness of the GDR and the madness going back decades and decades. So there's a microcosm at work here, which is particularly fitting. But I think we understand. I think we feel pathos here because she does. We'd feel exactly the same. I think it must be really hard to be in a very strange place, delving into the very darkest, strangest secrets of that place, to then to write about and be investigative, but to do it by herself as well. It seems very brave of her, I think, and quite very admirable.
The woman in the yellow bikini is pretending she has not seen me. What is this? Swimming chicken? I've had it with this place. I decide to plough on. I think brute force may just win through, and I beat my arms fast. I'm no great swimmer, and I know this is Eastern Germany, home of the drugged and the huge, the men, women, and the girl wonders. But for one instant, I'm Ardorny. I'm Shane Gould. I'm Susie O'Neill. I'm the human egg beater churning up water. Yellow schmellow. I haven't seen her either. What is the matter with me?
So I get this again. It's ridiculous. It's farcical, isn't it? Really, these two people swimming towards each other. This yellow bikini lady swimming towards yellow schmello, she calls her. I mean, you've got this. The asyndetic list here adds that sense of how frenzied and panicked and the energy of this section, and it builds up with incrementum as they're both swimming towards each other in this, as she calls it, swimming chicken, as in who's going to divert first and give up first. So it's quite farcical and quite funny, even to the point that she's using, I don't know, it's not even neologism, is it, schmello? It's just like sort of, I don't know what you call it, just a made up word, isn't it? Just inventing words to rhyme with another word. It's sort of baby talk, really. Yellow schmello. It shows how frantic and panicked she is. And then she even asks herself, what is the matter with me? And then it sort of builds and builds up with this increment, and there's a sense of pace and pace and pace as the two get closer and closer together. And then we get this anticlimax in the next section here, when of course a whistle is blown and thunder is found to be breaking the rules.
A whistle sounds. What? The chicken woman looks smug. The round is over and she's been declared a winner. A pool warden in 2 small trunks comes to the edge to address me and provide a diversion for the other paddlers. There's no swimming here, he says, only bathing. Oh, God. So, when can I swim, then, in this swimming pool? Let's see, he says. Warm bathing is Tuesdays, women only Wednesday mornings, women with children Wednesday afternoons, hydrotherapy Friday mornings, and, oh yes, there are lanes for swimming between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. on Monday, Thursday and Fridays. Weekends are free bathing, like this. I see. I get out. So this is orderly chaos. We will have free bathing between this time and that, which is now. We will allow unusual headgear and bombs, mole-picking and washing and babies, but no swimming.
Okay, lots to say about this bit here. We've got the orderly chaos at the top of that paragraph, the oxymoronic phrase orderly chaos, which is also symbolic, I think, of the GDR and possibly Berlin. And it's somewhere I've never been. I'd love to go to Berlin, but I imagine that particularly back at that time, and certainly before that time, there is that sense of orderly chaos, and certainly the things she's finding are chaotic, and the people she's speaking to are chaotic. So it's symbolic of the place. It's again reinforcing that idea of the swimming pool as a microcosm. Sorry, I didn't spell that, did I? Micro, M-I-C-R-O, and then cosm, C-O-S-M, meaning something, a small setting which represents a bigger setting. I think we have mentioned that before, so I apologise if I'm teaching grandmothers to suck eggs, as it were. Then there's this anaphora of we will have free bathing between this time and that, which is now. We will allow unusual headgear and bombs. So the imperatives there, the sort of strictness and the order of this swimming pool, but she seems to be applying it to Berlin generally. So the imperative anaphora there. And then the list of things that they will allow: unusual headgear, bombs, mole picking, and washing and babies. So it's getting more and more absurd and sort of, I don't know, back to that mole picking again and washing in the pool. It's physical. I know it's not bodily fluids again, but it's that sort of thing, isn't it? It's sort of human baseness, really. Yeah, let's push on a bit further.
There's order everywhere else in German life. Even the handicapped are labelled with yellow armbands. These are meant to alert others that they might need help, but are shocking to outsiders. 3 yellow dots pinned on the clothing. This pool must be the subconscious of the country, the mess that gives rise to all that order.
Yeah, so just some context there, of course, this is referring to the armbands worn by the Jews in the Second World War, and the ones who were shipped off to concentration camps, having to declare their status as Jews by wearing an armband. So it's sort of a nod back to already a very shameful practice in German history, sort of repeating itself here, where disabled people have to wear a mark to show their disability.
What am I doing here? People are looking at me. I walk away and see that the diving pool is utterly empty. I will obey. I won't swim in the non-swimming time. I slip into the diving pool and sit in the corner. No one can see me here, and there cannot be rules that I'm breaking. What am I doing here?
that anaphora then of what am I doing here, or just repetition if you prefer. But it's bigger than that, isn't it? It's bigger than just in the pool. It's her life generally. What is she doing in Stasiland generally? What can she hope to achieve here? And it's, I think we perfectly understand. I mean, it's a question we all wonder ourselves, don't we? I wonder it even now as I sit here in a little room with a microphone, staring at a very blank magnolia painted wall, talking into a microphone. What am I doing here? How has it come to this? Oh, good grief. Not again. Not again.
My body is weightless, and my legs out of perspective. They are both foreshortened and far away. And then it comes. I'm making portraits of people, East Germans, of whom there will be none left in a generation. And I'm painting a picture of a city on the old fault line of East and West. This is working against forgetting and against time.
Back to figurative description here. She's sort of creating something here and making portraits of people. She's painting a picture of a city. So there's this sort of creative, artistic element here to what she thinks she's doing or what she believes she's doing. She's reassuring herself that what she's doing is art. And I mean, that certainly fits with the style of narrative, doesn't it? Because, she's not just telling I'm trying to not use the word story. She's not just giving us facts. She is giving us a story. She is painting a very vivid picture of life in East Germany and under the GDR. So there is a reality, a truth in that as well. We understand that, but it's just interesting to see her thoughts on what she's doing, and then even describing the old fault line of East and West. Obviously, using that geographical term there to describe these two, well, not tectonic plates, but it's that sort of idea. These two different worlds colliding, and all the sort of alluding to the natural disasters that would occur from from two tectonic plates, earthquakes and all the rest of it. So it's pulling on that idea of these two clashing cultures and two clashing countries, and it is huge. I mean, I'm learning loads reading this. I mean, I was 6 when the Berlin Wall came down. I had no idea about it because I was only 6, but and it's, I suppose, a period of history I've never really looked back at particularly. But I'm learning loads about the GDR and Soviet the Soviet Union. It's fascinating.
Another whistle sounds, very loud. I look up and the warden is standing over me, so close he could have whispered to get my attention. "This is a diving pool," he says. "It is only for diving." I'm speechless, so he adds for good measure, "You are not diving." He's got me there. Then again, no one else is diving either, but I can't argue with a man armed with a whistle and prepared to use it, so I get out again. In the changing room, a rotund woman in some kind of uniform tells me my bathers are dripping on the floor. "That's because they are wet," I say. She comes towards me, about to say something else, but I pick up my bag and go. Too many rules.
Yeah, quite right. So again, description, appearances, a rotund woman. What a thing to say, a rotund woman. Again, I mean, it means overweight, doesn't it? But what an image. It sort of, I don't know, it paints a very funny picture in my mind, certainly. Sort of just this round person, a round woman. Just that word rotund, I suppose it just has all the right letters for the word round in it. I guess it just looks round. Maybe that's just my kinesthesia, I don't know. And then finishing off with a sentence fragment, too many rules. And of course there are. I mean, it seems accurate, doesn't it? There are too many rules here, and she can't do right for doing wrong, and she feels completely out of place, and she can't seem to escape the authorities and the totalitarianism of Germany that it seems to cling on to. So it's a really interesting experience. And again, it's not an important one. We don't need to know that she went swimming, but it sort of represents life more generally for her, doesn't it? So, and that's the end for chapter 14. We're going to push on with chapter 15 next. Yeah, I'm going to do one more, and then I'll come for lunch.